My supreme namaskarams to all of you. We are having a constitution and we discuss about constitutionalism, but we do not know what is constitution. Everybody speaks about constitution by saying that it is fundamental law of the land. It is true that how the people and administrative system and the rulers have to act is being explained in the constitution. Justice Cooley said, a constitution is the fundamental law of the state containing the principles upon which government is founded, regulating the division of the sovereign powers and directing to what persons each of these powers is to be confided and the manner in which it is to be exercised. Then you must know what is constitution first. Then why do we need a constitution? What are its functions? What role does it play in society? How does the constitution govern the allocation of powers in society? Several questions are being to be answered by all of us. Majority of the constitution countries, they say that in the world we must have a basic document called constitution. The constitution of a country is the fundamental law of the land on the basis of which all other laws are made and enforced. So we must know what is law. Right from the case Minerva Mills Land Limited versus Union of India AR 1980, Supreme Court 1789 onwards, if we understand the constitution is the supreme fundamental law of the land in a country, it defines the framework of the basic political principles, but also it establishes what the different government institutions should do in terms of procedure, powers and duties. Once we understand that constitution is the fundamental law of the land, we must understand by going through the various cases, especially Keswananda Bharati versus State of Kerala 1973 4 ACC 225, that our constitution is a unique apart from being the longest in the world. Second, the largest population is being governed by it. The political leaders who are great in this country have shaped it. It was chiseled and shaped by great political leaders and legal luminaries, most of whom had taken on active part in the struggle of freedom from the British yoke, and who knew what domination of a foreign rule meant in the way of deprivation of the basic freedoms and from the point of view of exploitation of the millions of Indians. That is the reason why we are having in the constitution a basic rights to freedom. We call them as fundamental rights under Article 19 to 22. When we see Article 19 to 22, we discuss and understand what is right to freedom. They are grouped together under the heading right to freedom. These articles deal with different aspects. Article 19 deals with 6 fundamental freedoms, 20 deals with protection in respect of conviction of offences, 21 deals with protection of life and personal liberty, 21A deals with right to protect education, and 22 deals with protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. We must first understand the freedoms that are granted under Article 19. Freedom of speech and expression. We don't have right to speak. We have right to freedom of speech and expression. People always misunderstand. They think that they have a right to freedom of speech means they have a right to speak. So they speak whatever they want. We have another freedom, that is to assemble peacefully and without arms. And another freedom of forming associations or unions and moving freely throughout the territory of India, and to reside and settle at any place in India, and to practice any profession or to carry any occupation, trade or business. we must understand that these rights to freedom of speech or rights to freedom is not absolute. There can be restrictions. For example, in Article 19, there are 5 restrictions which can be imposed as per Article 19 2 to 6. They must be reasonable. These restrictions must be reasonable. Whether a restriction is reasonable or not will be decided by the court. What do you mean by reasonable restrictions? While enjoying your right, you must not infringe in the other's rights. That is reasonable. We can't say any exact standard or general pattern of reasonableness. Substantive as well as procedural standpoint of view, these restrictions must be reasonable. The court will decide by keeping in view of the objective stand whether a particular restriction is reasonable or not. Reasonableness of the restriction is to be determined by the court and not the reasonableness of the law. So, these rights are imposing restrictions on the rights. So, what we have to see is the rights available to citizens only, because of which and because of them only a country, state or individual can develop. But while considering a national security, national unity, as we know, through these rights only a country can develop. At the same time, if the restrictions are not there, under the guise of these rights, everyone, while expressing their views or claims or contentions, they will misuse and also give speeches or do some actions in violative of the rights and in violative of the restrictions imposed, and due to that there will be law and order problem and national unity, national security is being disturbed. The Honorable Supreme Court recently reminded of its earlier decisions, which says that whenever there are such speeches or actions which interferes with the national security, national unity, national administration, to register the cases and punish the guilty. But even after reminders also, action is not being taken against those persons who are illegally doing whatever they want to do under the gauge of these rights. They are putting fire between the people on the basis of caste, creed, religion and monetary differences. Thereby they are damaging the reputation of the country and democracy is being killed. See, one can express different views and criticize the government fairly. That is the basic right and basic principle in order to claim that in a particular country there is democracy. But under the guise of caste, creed, reason, language, differences of money and other things, the people are creating enmity between the people and trying to disturb the national peace, national security, national unity. Recently, when we have seen India Hate Club report, we found that last year nearly 668 cases are registered. In Maharashtra, UP, Haryana, Uttarakhand, Karnataka and Gujarat and both the Telugu states, there are many number of cases in this regard. How? In this regard, many cases are registered only on the ground that the speeches and actions of political leaders are disturbing the mental peace, national security and national unity. In AP, last 5 years, all parties, they exercise the right to freedom of speech in such a way without following the restrictions and created differences. Not only this, in People Representative Act also, there are certain rights and restrictions which are not being followed by the political parties during elections. They speak whatever they like. They want to avoid losing the election. They want to come into power somehow. So they take this right as an opportunity and create differences and make the people to fight on the basis of these speeches and then somehow to come to power. The ADR given a report as per which 107 elected persons, maybe for assembly or parliament, cases are there against 107 persons who elected as members of parliament or assembly on the basis of this type of treason communicated by them. Not only this, nearly 400 people are given seats for contesting in the elections. So how they will form the government? Who are there? How the laws are created? The center says in the recent with the recent amendments in Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, 3 sections are there: 196, 299 and 353. They said that these sections are enough to solve the issues, but in practice it is not so. First we have to educate the people not to commit such type of crimes and not to elect the leaders who create these type of differences in the society. In case if any person violates the law and under the guise of right to freedom of speech or other rights makes any speech or do any action, then there must be immediate registration of the cases as per the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court and conducting inquiry and giving judgment, and even appeals also have to be disposed of very speedily. Then only in our country, in which second largest population having democracy as the basic instrument of law through which we are eradicating poverty and through which we are creating welfare state, through which we are having social revolution and creating all rights: right to food, right to education, right to having shelter, right to freedom of speech and expression, and the right to having income and right to live. All rights can be survived and protected. So I request a person like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who created an environment and a country with unity, must be there in both the states of Telugu states, or for that matter in India, any state, to see that laws are made to create reasonable restrictions on the right to freedom of speech and expression, through which national unity, integrity and security can be protected. Thank you very much.